Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to our Middle East. I'm Dan Diker. This is Al Shakaro Sadlana. We are this week talking about the Eritreans, the Red Sea people coming home to Israel, and what the Eritreans are saying about the Iranian regime dangers across the Red Sea, not only to Red Sea states and North Africa, but the entire Middle East. Join us. I'm so honored and pleased to have Habtom Mehari, a doctoral student, intellectual from the Tigrayani nation in Eritrea, who has been a long-time adopted son of Israel, living in Israel for many years, completing his doctoral dissertation in Israel, a real expert on all things Middle East, and particularly we had long conversations late at night, Habtom, on the dangers of the Iranian regime storming the waters of the Red Sea and looking to take control of via maritime terror, floating terror bases across the Red Sea. And also, we've got a real Eritrean community in Israel. So we have a lot of things to talk about. Tell me, what is so important for the many thousands of Eritreans there are in Israel to make their home here in the Jewish and democratic state?
Oh, thank you for having me, Dan. So, look, we have about Eritreans, about 17,000 Eritreans today, and there was about 50,000 Eritreans a few years ago, and now they're leaving the country. What they wanted a temporary protection until they go back home, and they wanted to stay in Israel because in Eritrea there is a ethnic cleansing of the Tigrayani people by the regime, and they are escaping ethnic cleansing. And they go everywhere. They go to Europe, they go to Israel, was one of the destinations. And then I think they wanted to stay here until the situation in their country becomes better and then go back home.
They feel endangered by the regime in Eritrea.
The regime, what the regime is doing is there is an ethnic cleansing of the Tigrayani people by the regime. The regime is doing nation building. He wants to destroy the Tigrayani nation's ancient civilization and replace it with a new colonial identity, call it Eritrean national identity. And it's very difficult to do that.
But the Tigrayani nation is 2.8 million of the 4 million Eritreans within the borders of Eritrea. So you're really the majority population there.
Look, we don't know the statistics because in Eritrea, the statistics is secret by the government because the government wants to say there's 50% Muslim and 50% Tigrayani, right? But the statistics, according to our studies, it shows that between 70 to 80% of the population is Tigrayani, and about 20 to 30% of the population is these tribal clan minorities in Eritrea that speaks 8 different languages. So we have about, maybe the statistics today is about 5.6 million Eritreans, and about 3.5 or 4 million are Tigrayans. And we have another Tigrayan in Tigray, which is part of the same nation, right? The Tigrayan
in Ethiopia. In other words, there are actually 2 to 3 times the number of Tigrayani nationals in Ethiopia as there are in Eritrea.
Yeah, the Tigrayan nation was divided by the Italians into 2. The few of the people, the Tigrayani, the few of the people stayed in Eritrea, and the majority went with Ethiopia. So in Ethiopia today, we have about 8 million Tigrayans, and in Eritrea, we have about 3 to 4 million Tigrayans. So we are the majority in Eritrea, but we are much less than the Tigrayans in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, the Tigrayans are minority. They are only 6%. But it's the same nation. It's a nation that have ancient civilization, law, written alphabet, written script. It's an ancient civilization. It's one of the, along Persia, Rome, we were one of the civilizations, the Aksumite civilization.
And you've made it very clear that the Oraita, which is also the roots of your Semitic language, right, and culture, go back really, actually, the Talmudic language of Aramaic calls the Torah, Israel's Torah, Deoraita. So there's a deep connection between your own culture and history and the Jewish people.
Yeah, of course. We are Orit. The Christianity, they imposed Christianity on us. But, today we are Orit, but with Christianity flavor, right? So the difference between the Jewish and us is that it's without Hebrew, without the Talmud, but we believe only the Torah. And our civilization, our religion, our civilization comes from the Torah. So we have deep connection with Israel, with the Jewish people. Jerusalem is part of our history. And yes, of course, Christianity tried to impose on us. They tried to impose on us, but they could not. They could not. The Orthodox Christian from the Amhara, the Egyptians, they tried to use the Amhara proxy to impose the Christianity on us, but finally we kept the Orit, but also we have a flavor of Christianity in our religion today.
Do you feel, as an Eritrean, Tigrani Eritrean, adopted son of Israel, raising your children as Israelis, actually, for many years here in Tel Aviv, and you frequently come to Jerusalem. You've been a contributor, an intellectual force, and a contributor to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. I've learned so much from you as well in our many years knowing one another here. How do you characterize the experience of the almost, there were at some point 50,000 Eritreans in Israel, some of them political refugees, some of them in other status. How would you characterize their experience here in Israel as opposed to perhaps other places in the Middle East?
Look, when we first arrived in Israel, everybody thought that they come to Israel.
When was the major influx of Eritreans?
It was between 2008 to 2012.
That's when you and I met, was back in 2008.
Exactly. So Israel gave a temporary group protection, but the way it treated the asylum seeker was not. It was always to force them to report them, right? But it gave them a group protection, and of course, this is not available in Saudi Arabia or in Egypt or in other Arab countries. Of course, Israel is a democratic state, and it provides a group protection, but it could do it much more than that. And Israel, it's the Tigrean are more than 95% of the population in Israel, and the only way Israel can have people-to-people connection in this region, in the Middle East and the Horn of Africa, is Eritrea. The Tigreans have cultural relationship, historical relationship, and strategic and security interests. So Israel has the only people-to-people relationship with the Tigreans, with Eritrea. I mean, if you look today, the Egyptians, Israel has a long relationship with Egypt, but the Egyptian population is
very anti. There's tremendous Jew hatred in
exactly. Even if you go to Jordan, the Jordanians have extreme hatred against the Jewish. So we, the Eritreans, the Tigreans, we are a minority in the Middle East, in the Horn of Africa, like the Jewish, right? We have a cult. We are isolated.
So you see yourselves as the Jews of the Red Sea.
Yeah, we are Orit. Orit is the Torah. So we are people of Orit, and the Jewish. We are minority in the Middle East. So we have the same destiny. We are both doomed to isolation in the Middle East, in the Horn of Africa.
Help our listeners, our viewers understand. The Eritrea is right next to Djibouti, strategically placed right on the coast of the Red Sea, just above Bab el-Mandeb Pass, which today has become a strategic choke point that leads, if you look at the maps, right up to the Straits of Tiran, to the Gulf of Hormuz, right towards Egypt, a dead shot towards Egypt and the Suez Canal, and right up into Israel. So the force that dominates, that controls that choke point, the Bab el-Mandeb choke point, the pass, is going to control the waterways leading right up to the Levant, actually.
Yeah, of course. Now the region, the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb, it's becoming very, very important. It's a T point. The Chinese, the Americans, it's the global powers are coming, and the U.S. has now started a few years ago, from 2008, they are just focused on the Indo-Pacific strategy. So the Bab el-Mandeb is now becoming a struggling, a combating place, a competition place for the global powers, China and the US, but also the regional powers. The Turkish are trying to have base in Sudan. They just are renovating the Suakin. It was used to be Ottoman port. Now they're trying to renovate it. So the Turkish are trying in Sudan. They already have a base in Somalia. So also not only these global powers, but also these regional powers are trying to have control on this very, very strategic place. Now, Eritrea is located on this strategic place. It's very important for Israel. Perhaps Israel is not now trying to be there, but the UAEs have already a base in Somaliland. They're trying to also have influence the Sudanese. The Saudis are doing the same.
The Chinese have a base in Djibouti.
Chinese have a base in Djibouti. In Djibouti, there's many countries who have base, including Turkey. So this area is becoming very, very important globally. So in the emerging Cold War between China and the US is going to be very, very important. So we are located on this important location, and you have to understand, Eritrea is the only nation there which does not have internal and external problems. It's the most stable country in the Horn of Africa, and it's now assisting, it assisted Ethiopia against the conflict with Tigray. It's now trying to assist Burhan in Sudan. It's trying to assist Somalia. So Eritrea is the regional power in that region. When you take Ethiopia, Sudan, Djibouti, and Somalia, these countries are getting, there's conflict in Ethiopia. The war doesn't seem like it will end. There's a conflict in Sudan already. Somalia has been 50, 60 years, the conflict is ongoing. So the only country that is stable and with a strategic location, that location is Eritrea. So it's very, very important location.
So amidst all of the global superpower competition, Russia, China, Iran, the United States, we have the Iranian regime that has created floating terror bases throughout the Red Sea, attacking Israeli ships, attacking U.S. ships at interest. The United States just sent several thousand Marines into the Red Sea area to protect commercial shipping. Saudi Arabia has been a target. Egypt has become a target. It seems that Iran is really spreading its floating wings throughout the Red Sea, and really poses a danger, a regional danger, not only a danger to Israel, but even to the competing superpowers.
Yeah, Iran is a danger. We know Iran is a danger because we have historical relationship with Iran. Back in the 6th century, we were one of the most powerful empires in that region. We controlled that trade system, trade route. And because of the Persian, we just lose that control and we get into a everlasting poverty, right? So we have historical perspective with the Iranians. The Iranians are very dangerous. And the danger of the Iranians has not only come from their activities, their terror activities in the Red Sea, their terror activities using the Hutu against Saudi Arabia, but they're also very, very patient. They are patient. The war for them...
chess players.
Yeah, the war for them is not about 50 years, 70 years, so 100 years, 200 years. They can wait. So that's also the danger that the people have to understand. They're not in rush. So, but the danger, and then they have this terror activities in the Red Sea. Israel a few months ago, some sources say attacked an Iranian ship that comes to do this terror activism in the Red Sea. They are attacking Saudi Arabia using the Hutu proxy, right? The UAE is not also safe. Israel is not safe, and also Assab is about 300 kilometers from Yemen. We are also in danger of the Iranian regime. So the Iranians are very dangerous, but also they are patient. You need to have historical perspective to understand them. They're very, very, very dangerous, and they have to. And
they're playing the long war. They're
Yeah.
not. They're not. The West tends to be much more short and medium term solution centric,
Exactly.
whereas the Iranians are playing for they're playing over centuries, and they're playing the long war.
Yeah, they're playing the long war. That's also the danger that people have to understand.
So, in the midst of all of this competition, among the superpower and the regional powers, how do you see the possibility of creating a coalition of forces in order to really take control of the Bab el-Mandeb Pass and secure the Red Sea area into the Gulf of Oman, on the whole Indo-Pacific region? Because the waters, which are much more difficult to signify in terms of borders. It's sort of an open border hunting season by Iranian flag commercial ships, which are really spy ships, and others of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that are attacking different commercial interests and creating all kinds of chaos. So how do we create much more a security regime that can really secure this area for all of the stakeholders in the area?
Hey, look, if you see the U.S. abandoning not only the Middle East but also that region, right? So, for example, if you see Sudan, it's just the U.S. is leaving, and it just left Sudan to Saudis and the Emirates, and Saudis are fighting there. It's just the Emirates are helping. They say that the Emirates are helping Hemeti, and the Saudis are helping Burhan. And Ethiopia is also abandoned because the Chinese already control Ethiopia using their debt trap. So someone has to fill this vacuum, right?
Let me just make that clear to everybody. It's a debt trap, meaning China basically loans money to smaller regional players, even larger. Ethiopia lent money, and also Somalia, Sudan, Djibouti, and then they enslave people to the debt.
Exactly. So someone has to fill this vacuum, and I think Eritrea can be a very, very important player there because of its stability, because of its historical perspective, and its strategic location. So you've got these three things, and the Israelis have to come up. They have to come and play there. They can't just avoid this region, the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea. They just can't avoid and look back, because that's very, very important for them if they wanted to be a very important player for the global competition, like the U.S. and its European allies. So I think Israel has to come and cooperate with Eritrea and with the Saudis and create this alliance and create there a very reliable power for the West, for the U.S., Europeans, and its allies.
So here you have Israel being really Israel's actually smaller than Eritrea. We're probably maybe half the size of Eritrea.
It's just 1/5 of Eritrea.
1/5, 20% of the size of Eritrea, and yet you're suggesting that Israel become an anchor of security for the whole area. You and I actually were chatting about this, and we mentioned the fact, noting that Israel is not an expansionist power. Notwithstanding all of the propaganda in the region against Israel, also from some African countries, and clearly the Arab Muslim majority Middle East, that for decades has been issuing this poisonous propaganda against Israel. But as you noted the other night, Israel's not an expansionist power, and it's known not to be an expansionist power, but just being sort of a status quo power and an anchor of security, not threatening any of the regional players, so that they depend on Israel to really act on behalf of a much more secure region.
Yeah, I mean, look, Israel is not an expansionist state, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows that. But of course, Israel needs to secure its interests in this region. No, it's not even new. Ben Gurion did it, the periphery policy. Ben Gurion has a relationship with Ethiopia back then because Ethiopia controlled the Bab el-Mandeb at that time. The Golda Meir...
Until 1990, right?
1960s, 1970s, 1960s, 1950s. So it's not even new. Israel has to go back to the Ben Gurion policy. But Israel has a budget for that back then, when Israel was a very poor country. Now Israel is a very rich country and a high-tech country. So Israel needs to protect its interests in the region, but also it has to create it for itself a new role to be very, very important. Israel was very important during the Cold War during the Cold War against the Arab satellite countries, right? Against the Arab-Russian satellite countries. And Israel was very important during the war against terrorism. It was very important. It has a very important role during back then. Now, what is Israel's role? And Israel can be a very strategic, a very important a country for the West in the Bab el-Mandeb, in the Gulf of Arab and the Indian Ocean. And what Israel needs is that to understand what's happening in that region, to understand and try to know what opportunities Israel has in this region. For example, Eritrea and the Eritrean people could have people-to-people relationship and could create strong relationship with Israel and try to promote this thing. Otherwise, Israel cannot look back and see when the Iranians are trying to influence African countries. The Raisi was in Africa a few months ago, in Kenya, in Zambia, and the Iranians, they're trying to bring Africans on their side.
Into their orbit.
Exactly. They need diplomatically, they wanted to get rid of the isolation and everything. And Africa is the youngest continent.
Yeah, so the African population actually is due to double between now and 2030.
Yeah, the demography says everything. So I think Israel needs to look at that and start to get a policy and a strategy that...
Or 2050. I think they're due to double by 2050.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And you've got the lowest per capita GDP in the world. But yet you're mineral rich, right?
Yeah, and you've got all these natural resources, right? So and all this renewable energy and all this technology stuff, this natural, they have to bring the materials from Africa. So in terms of natural resources, in terms of demography, in terms of strategic location, particularly in the Horn of Africa, I think Israel has a great potential to be a very, very important country. But of course, Israel needs to think in that and need to fight Iran, not only in this area, in its borders, in Hamas, Hezbollah, and in the West Bank. Israel needs to face Israel also in the
Iran,
along the globe, along the wider circle.
We used to call it, it's Ben Gurion divided into first ring countries, second ring countries, and third ring countries.
Yeah. Also, the outgoing chief of staff did it. The first track is in Gaza, Hezbollah, and then the second track is Yemen and things. But unfortunately, Eritrea or the Bab el-Mandeb was not put with that, and then the global, right? So I think that has to be. It has to be.
How is that going to work out? Do you think that the African, the Horn countries in the African Horn understand that Israel is the solution, not the problem?
Look, in the last 50 years, and then the last, today, if you look back then, you see Israel. Israel is the only hope in the Middle East, right? You see Israel's flourishing economically, a high-tech country. So, Israel is a solution. People can see, the population, these Islam countries and the Arabic countries, of course, these people will not never, but they are anti-Semitic. They are against Israel, right? But you've got but the government is already Sudan tried to normalize, right? The government of Sudan tried to normalize. Of course, Sudan needs money, and they can create tactical alliances with even. They used to do it with Qatar and Turkey, and then now they're doing it with the Emirates and Saudi Arabia. They do this. So the government just can do it, but Israel has a people-to-people relationship with Eritrea.
Even with this regime that you've spoken critically about.
Yeah, even with the regime. They used to have relationship. They have diplomatic relationships. Israel has an embassy in Eritrea. It's understaffed, but Eritrea has an embassy here in Israel. It's only spying the Eritreans here. They don't have a strong diplomatic, trade, economic cooperation, but they do have a relationship. The regime in Eritrea, they don't want to have close relationship with Israel because Israel is an internal political issue for Eritrea today, because the Tigrinya supports the Jewish, and the tribal clan minorities supports the Palestinian cause. So it divides the population along the Tigrinya and the minorities.
It's amazing. I want to emphasize this. What we're saying here is that when Israel has an explosion with the Iran-backed Hamas or the Iran-backed cells in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria, it actually causes an internal domestic crisis in Eritrea.
Yeah, it divides the people, like the minorities, these tribal clan minorities. They support the Palestinian cause, and they are against Israel. And the Tigrinya, they feel that Israel is a Judaism and Hebrew is indigenous in this area, in this region. That's where we live. So that's what. So they support Israel. So it divides the population along the minorities and the Tigrinya nation. So they don't want the regime doesn't want to see that. So for example, in the world, Eritrea is the only country that does not recognize the Palestinian state and does not have, even the regime does not have.
Eritrea has not officially recognized the
Palestinian,
even though so many countries in the United Nations have.
Exactly, and the regime does not have any relationship with any Palestinian entity, right? In one hand, but in the other hand, it's also. For example, last time they voted against Israel in the African Union, right? So they don't want it because they wanted to please the minorities. You see, we are against Israel. It's because they don't want to get closer to Israel, but they don't recognize the Palestinians, or they don't have any relationship with any Palestinian entity.
Because they want. It seems to me that the regime and its leader want to maintain complete flexibility and independence in their decision making.
Yeah, to Israel, it's a special issue because it's an internal political issue in Eritrea. So they don't want to get closer to Israel because even the Arabs, if you see the Arabs, they always write all this information is that Israel has some base in Eritrea. Israel has some security bases in Israel. It's not true. It's just a conspiracy theory because they always think that Eritrea is closer to Israel, right? So Isaias does not want to show that. Wants to show that it's not. So he does these crazy things against Israel, right? And he doesn't want to get closer to Israel, and that's why he did not accept the Israeli ambassador to Eritrea. He did not accept until today. But on the other hand, Eritrea is the only country in the world today that does not recognize the Palestinian state. So it's very interesting.
Why don't they recognize the Palestinian state? If in fact the large minority under the rule of the regime, but to which the regime feels much closer than the Tigrayanim, to whom they feel threatened, or by whom they feel threatened, why don't they just recognize a Palestinian state? What's called an observer, non-member observer state.
Because Isaias Afwerki is also Tigrinya. He himself is a Tigrinya. And he does not believe that there exists a Palestinian nation state in the Middle East. He knows that. He knows that Hebrew and the Jewish are indigenous here. It's not. He understands that, so he doesn't want to recognize a Palestinian state or a Palestinian nation, or it doesn't have any relationship with any Palestinian entity.
It's quite extraordinary, Habtom, that the prime minister is Tigrayanim, and yet he's running a regime that distances and alienates his own nation.
Yeah, exactly. He's doing that because. You have to understand the Eritrean politics to understand what's happening in Eritrea. This elite, they are brought from Ethiopia, from Tigray. They are Tigrayan from Tigray. They were brought by the Italians and replaced the organic leaders in Hamasian in Eritrea. They were the Hamasian around Asmara is the political and economic center of Eritrea. So the Italians brought this elite and replaced the organic leadership. So this leadership, they have to maintain their power, and in order to maintain their power, they have to isolate Eritrea, they have to make the people poor, and they have to
because they're not a democracy.
They don't have, for example, Isaias is from Tigray. He doesn't have any social base in Asmara and surrounding. So he needs this isolation, monopoly, and making poverty is the way he has to rule the country. That's why he isolates the country. It's for internal Eritrean political dynamics. It has nothing to do with the world. For example, you see, he doesn't have any relationship with China. Eritrea is the only country that did not sign it.
A debt deal with China.
Exactly. Yeah. And also the Belt and Road Initiative. That's it. Almost all countries sign on that.
Yeah.
And does not have any relationship, cooperation with Russia. But again, he supported Russia in a UN vote. So he's sending this conflicting message.
Yeah.
It's all,
It's a psychiatric state of affairs in Eritrea, otherwise known as the Marceau balancing act. You know, they're doing a high wire act over the Red Sea. This is what we're saying, and many of our viewers and listeners do not know anything about Eritrea or the Red Sea cultures or the Red Sea geostrategic problems. But what we've discussed today is that the leadership of the Eritrean regime representing the Tigrayeni nation is actually working in this high wire act against the natural, cultural, historical interests of his own people in order to maintain regime independence, while you, Habtom Mehari, are saying that Eritrea, even under this regime, is a key to securitizing and stabilizing a chaotic and dangerous Iranian-threatened Red Sea area.
Exactly.
Maritime terror across the Red Sea by the Iranian regime. It could be that Eritrea is a key to stability and security, working together with Israel as an anchor of security for the whole Red Sea, and specifically the Bab el-Mandeb Pass, which is that choke point that the entire region, and in fact the world, is competing for and quite concerned about the Iranian regime's intensifying control and terror across the Red Sea. I want to thank you very much for your insights, really teaching us a lot about the Red Sea people, the cultures, Eritrea's very strategic position in this entire calculus. Very dangerous, but on the other hand, opportunities for cooperation and collaboration that weren't there before. Yeah. So Habtom Mehari, and a doctoral student, almost a doctor, and I share that with you. We're submitting our theses together, and I hope we'll have many more chances for collaboration, discussion, and debate here on Our Middle East. Al Shakar Al Sadlana, you're the first guest we've had, really an extension of the greater Middle East into the Red Sea countries, the Horn of Africa. But then again, this is the greater Middle East. Thank you very much, Habtom, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dan, for having me.
Really appreciate it.